A leader in event education, the Event Leadership Institute offers on-demand video classes, interviews with industry mavericks, and online instructor-led professional development courses taught by industry experts. Visit eventleadershipinstitute.com for more information and to see a schedule of upcoming classes.
Are you a follower?
9, 8,
Okay, so we're gonna probably add.
Welcome to GatherGeeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here are your hosts, BizBash CEO David Adler and Executive Editor Beth Kormanik.
Hi, David.
Hey, Beth. Here we go. Another podcast.
That's right. We are going to take a peek into the future today by listening into your conversation with ClaIre Dillon. She's formerly a developer at Microsoft and now a technology consultant. And you spoke with her at the Connect 17 event in Ireland about how these innovations are going to affect the event industry.
Yeah, no, it was so interesting to go over there and hear their perspective. Dublin is a fantastic place, and it is also a hub of innovation. And you're seeing some of the top technology companies solving problems there that affect our industry.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's something that, if you're a planner and you think this doesn't affect you, well, it does, because it's going to be something that your clients are going to ask about, and you need to stay on top of, not only what's here, but what's coming. So from mixed reality and virtual reality to something called holoportation.
Yes.
I'm saying that right? Well, let's get into it.
Great. So I'm here with ClaIre Dillon, who recently left Microsoft, and I'm at the Connect 17 conference here in Ireland. And she gave a fascinating talk today on the future of technology. And I want her to give us a little bit of background on some of the most interesting new developments that will possibly impact the meeting and event industry. And I'm going to let her talk about it. She's going to surprise you with this.
Well, I think I started with maybe some of the stuff that maybe people are more familiar with, which would be around things like the Internet of Things and sensors and facial recognition and kind of technology and innovation that's happening around venues in terms of making them easier to manage and interact with. And then I moved on to some of the kind of more artificial intelligence type applications of technology, like translation and things like the Microsoft Translate plugin for PowerPoint, which allows you to real-time translate what speakers are saying into, I think, up to 60 different languages, including Klingon, which I was kind of surprised to see. I don't know how that's going to work, but I think those sort of technologies really help make events and content useful for people and address new and different audiences, as well as in addressing accessibility needs. But I think
when you said though the translation program, I was surprised that it was really in real time, and you actually is it from where you can hear what the speaker is saying, or was it things that were programmed in?
No, that was all real time. So that's live translation. I've actually seen it work in a research facility, not in terms of actually providing the subtitles. And in this particular instance, the Microsoft Translator plugin provides an actual subtitle to the presentation, and also actually allows you to create an app where people can see it in all different languages. So any audience member can get their own personalized version in up to 60 languages in real time. So that's what the speaker is saying being translated in real time for the audience members, which I think is amazing.
And how does that? What's the economics of that? What are you buying?
In terms, well, I mean, my understanding is that you can actually download that plugin for free to try it out. I mean, from Microsoft's perspective, it's just showcasing some of the innovation that they are advocating in AI in terms of what the power of that is. I'm not sure if it's actually in production at the moment, or if it's just a kind of a trial for people to actually have a go of.
And it probably plugs in right into your PowerPoint.
That's right, yeah. I mean, it looked pretty easy to me. I mean, I haven't actually tried it out myself personally. I was saying actually, it's interesting, having come from Microsoft, I wasn't aware of that plugin until someone kind of pointed it to me recently when I said I was coming here. And of course, that's the thing with technology today. It's not so much about what's possible; it's about finding out that it's there, which I think is probably the bigger challenge. So everyone can take a look at it. I think it's aka.ms/ Microsoft Translation. I think that's the URL, but I'll get it to you anyway, David, and you can.
I thought it was incredible. I mean, it was. I mean, depending on the accuracy of it, it seems like it's really cracking the code on it.
I think so, and I actually saw the first demonstration of that of what I saw of that was actually in a research demonstration, and they were showing not just subtitles but actually playback in real time to an audience. So it was audio, and I remember at the time they were making the point there was a kind of a very short lag, but they were making the point that the translation services could actually pick up even inflection and tone, and as well as actual it's not in that kind of automaton voice. It was actually mimicking the actual tone of the speaker, which I thought as well was amazing. So I think what you're really seeing here is that those kind of translation services are going so far beyond the kind of text translations to actually create these wonderful new experiences.
It was really incredible. So the next part was the real people's mouths like dropped, because you were talking about holography in the next generation.
That's right. This is stuff that makes me really excited. It's around mixed reality. So, many people have heard of virtual reality and maybe even have experienced some of the virtual reality headsets and things like that. And, and I've seen virtual reality, and to be honest, some of it actually makes me a bit ill, because you kind of have that kind of out of place sensation. And the thing that I was kind of expressing was that when I first tried mixed reality, which is more along the lines of taking 3D virtual content and placing it in your real world environment, the difference between that experience and something like virtual reality is that, for me anyway, the kind of emotional reaction to things that you see in your environment is actually different than the notion that you're in an imagined environment. So I think that kind of experience is actually really much more interactive than any other interactive medium I've ever experienced. And the emotions that it creates and the way that you change how you interact with content in that environment is different. You really have to kind of experience it kind of try it to experience it and to know what I'm talking about. But I can tell you that in my personal experience, it's far beyond any other interactive medium I've ever experienced.
So we're on radio type kind of. Can you sort of explain it, what you think it is, to the person that is listening?
Okay, so imagine a set of, like, HoloLens is Microsoft's mixed reality headset, and what that is essentially a device that you wear. It kind of like, think of it like a helmet. It's not a full helmet, but think of it like kind of goggles on a helmet, where you can see your whole environment, but into that environment is inserted virtual reality objects. My first experience, and also I should mention that those objects interact with your environment. So, for example, I've seen demos whereby you would have a hopping little 3D fairy, but it's hopping on the table in your room. It's clever enough to understand the context of your environment and to put that like it's interacting realistically in your environment. Or another example was that I actually was in a room and it could map the room that you're in, understand where the planes or the surfaces of the walls were, and actually make it seem like the walls were breaking and that objects were coming through the walls to kind of interact with you, in this case, like attack you, I think. It's so different to have that be in your environment, because it's kind of changing the world. It's changing reality in your mind, and so those kinds of experiences are great. Now, I mean, many of the actual applications of this are not quite so dramatic. I've seen,
like, what would be some of the sort of the practical applications?
Yeah, practical applications. I mean, one of the best examples I've seen is there's two actually. One is an example where there was an airline who were using it to actually train their mechanics so that they could actually work on airport or aircraft engines. Now, of course, aircraft engines are incredibly expensive. Allowing someone to work on it and tinker with it is actually quite expensive and risky. You don't want, your trainee technician to be working on real aircraft engines. So I saw the example where they were actually taking this, making a 3D model, allowing people to walk around it and interact with it like it's a real model, be able to see how the whole thing works, point at it, kind of describe what goes wrong when something goes wrong, blah, blah, blah. But of course, they don't have to have an aircraft engine, which of course you can only have so many of in the world. So that's one practical example. That's one where it's just not economically possible to actually be able to interact with these objects. An even better one is where it's not physically possible to be able to interact with those objects. There's another famous demo of the HoloLens where they actually have bodies, human bodies, and you can actually use the HoloLens to actually delve into the human anatomy and maybe things like take away skin and look at muscle interactions. Things that, well, you'd need a whole load of cadavers if you're actually going to do that in real life. life, but actually this allows people to actually collaborate, even from different parts of the world, on a similar model of the human body and see how things work in a 3D real way. It's those sort of experiences that you can't actually recreate. You can't actually, with a real body, strip out the muscles to see the nervous system or the arteries, or strip out the arteries to see how the muscles look without them. I mean, these are the kind of interactions that you can only do in a virtual sense.
So these kind of things are going to actually transform trade shows and selling and things that people don't have to bring in huge things in pop-up spaces and temporary spaces.
That's what I think. So I think the real change in terms of conferencing and events is that not that you're trying to change the really good things that are happening at events, like people talking to each other, but when you think about the kind of things that you could never bring to an event, that would not practically be possible, this allows you to take those into a hall or a space or anywhere that you might be, and transport that kind of experience around the world. And I think that's, number one, incredibly important. And number two, when you look at things like people getting creative around that space and creating things that don't yet exist, then you're actually not just thinking about what's practically impossible, but actually helping create new realities in, again, ways that you couldn't do physically, not from an economic or a practical perspective.
One of the things that I've been talking about is how do you create group experiences for this? It's not quite there yet, when I mentioned that this morning.
Well, actually, I mean, so maybe not in terms of huge groups, but in this particular instance with HoloLens, you can actually have multiple people working on the same model. So you can, I've seen demos where there are multiple people walking around the same model, interacting with it with gestures, and everyone who has the headset on and is sharing that experience can actually share that vision. So they're all seeing the same thing in the room. So in many respects, that is a kind of a group experience. It's not just an individual who's experiencing that.
But can you do it with large groups?
I haven't seen it in large groups yet, but as I was explaining, technology is accelerating at such a rate that I wouldn't expect that to be too far behind.
Okay, talking about not too far behind, the last part of what you talked about today was very Star Trekian and really, really sort of can transform the way we communicate. Holotransport, I think you called it?
Holoportation.
Holoportation. Oh my God, that's even better.
I know. I mean, to be honest, there's a little bit of me that every time something I see from Star Trek or Star Wars that appears in real life, I'm like, oh my God, there's a little bit of inside me goes, we're here, we're in the future now. But so Holoportation is a Microsoft research project. And much of what I was describing before, and a lot of the demos that you see online around HoloLens is, pre-canned content. They're pre-recorded 3D models. What Holoportation shows is real-time creation of holographics in your environment. So what we saw in the video was the idea of having someone in a faraway place, in another room, which has a kind of a similar setup to your room, and you can create the environment where you video them in terms of 3D and in real time have them appear as a holographic image in your space, in your environment. And what we saw were, for example, the researchers speaking with a colleague who was in that other room, and they were interacting and high-fiving and speaking like they were in the same room together. Or, in fact, which I thought was particularly touching, the researcher talking to his child who was in that different place, and he could see her in real time, in real life, and have her move around his space and interact with her like she was in the room. And I thought that's such a pointer towards what experiences of communication is going to be like in the future.
Do you think from a meeting and event perspective, you'll see panels from all around the world in a hologram in real time?
Exactly. I mean, we've all seen the idea of the big head on the screen. We're kind of going to go like, let's teleconference in our expert from wherever. And you're kind of looking at it going, yeah, okay, that's great. But do I really feel connected with this person? But like in this respect, you can actually have the person in the room. Not only that, but I think what we saw at the end of the video, which I thought again was cool, was the idea of actually recording that in a kind of a 3D model so that, not only is the person there as a hologram for anyone who's wearing the headset, and that you can interact with them. And again, I understand that right now there may be challenges in having a large audience do that, but certainly in an intimate setting that would work. But also the idea of recording that and having that played back to people after the fact, where you've got people who have never in the same room together talking to each other like they were, and actually having that physical interaction with the gestures and everything, which actually makes that so much more real. And also, if you're wearing the HoloLens, you can almost walk around that experience, so it feels so much more than just watching it on a 2D screen.
It's so incredible. And you also talked about the economics of this. You talked about when these things actually hit and timing and all of that. Can you explain a little bit about what you were talking about?
Yeah, I was kind of referencing some of the stuff I've heard for Ray Kurzweil, who's famous for predicting when certain types of technology takes off. And what I thought is interesting about his methodology in that is that he doesn't, like many futurists, kind of look at what's happening, what's possible right now. And then they kind of go, well, in 5 years' time, that'll be everywhere. But that doesn't always happen, right? I mean, we've been talking about AI since the 1960s and it still hasn't taken off. And Ray Kurzweil has a different approach. He kind of looks at what's possible. He looks at where it's solving a real world problem. He kind of identifies those scenarios. And then he maps it against the times at which the economics for that kind of technology makes sense. So he's looking at, for example, the price of computational power. And at a point at which the price of the computational power that's required to make that technology work on a large scale, that's when it takes off. That's how he makes his predictions. And he's been he's been really accurate over the years, like 35 years of predicting. And in many cases, he gets it down to the year. And he uses these rules of, like things like Moore's Law or in the past in terms of how technology is getting cheaper all the time and how the various different trends come in on that. And he's pretty accurate on that. But what I love is that it's not down to what's technologically possible. It's actually down to what's economically feasible and where that makes sense from an economic perspective. And that makes sense to me, right? Because, people have been talking about what's economically possible for an awful long time, but it's only when the economics make sense that it really takes off. Anything
that you can remember about what he was saying about what's next?
Well, I was saying earlier the one of the most I don't want to say, well, it was a bit alarming. It was alarming to me. I was kind of thinking, oh my God, I never thought of this before. In the particular interview I was watching, he was talking about longevity, escape velocity for longevity, which is kind of like if he can live for another 15 years, the rate at which technology to elongate your life will be evolving will be faster than real time. And at that point, basically, if you can live that long, the things that may be coming at you to kill you from natural circumstances will be solved at a greater rate than they're coming at you. And at that point, I guess we can all live forever. Unless Ophelia or some natural disaster kind of hits us in the meantime.
But you're kind of a sci-fi geek, so...
I love it. And that's why it's alarming, I think, things like living forever, there's lots of great things about that, but there's a lot of negatives on that side. And this is why we all need to get more into AI and technology and understand some of these circumstances that are... or potential outcomes. I mean, that's very sci-fi. But look, hey, he's been accurate in the past. So, I mean, who's to say?
Did he hit the iPhone?
I'm not sure he hit the iPhone per se. I'll have to go back and look at the things. He talked about a lot of kind of the technology trends. He talks about the fact that he's not great at actually predicting who or how they will emerge, but more so when some of these kind of more broader technology trends will hit mainstream. I can only imagine that the idea of personal devices that will be able to have multiple functions, like, for example, play music and phones and photos and all that sort of thing, was probably on his horizon, but I need to double check that.
Well, he probably just watched Star Trek like we did.
Well, it turns out that an awful lot of technological advancement does seem to mirror that in some way, or at least that seems to be the goal of a lot of technologists. But I mean, the parallels are endless, I guess. But hey, I mean, who if not the sci-fi creators and creativity folk they're the people who are actually envisioning what our world would be like with these technologies in a very real sense. So I guess that's a good enough place to look for what's happening in the future.
So the last question. So you were a head of Microsoft in Ireland for many years.
Of the developer experience and evangelism group in Microsoft Ireland.
And now you spent the day at our conference for the event industry. Have you learned anything today, or sort of, has it opened up your eyes about anything about our industry and technology?
Look, I mean, this is what's amazing about the world. I mean, I've spent 20 years in the IT industry, and technology is amazing, and technology can do amazing things. What I've been coming to realize, though, is that technology by itself is not enough. It's really the application of technology in various industries and the rate at which they will pick it up and how it's used, and understanding a little bit more about the domain expertise of these various industries industries. That's really the key to how and when and how technology will actually impact our lives. And every time I come to a conference outside the IT industry, I learn something new and amazing. I mean, your own presentation in terms of the various different things that are happening in the event space to make experiences more unique. It makes complete sense, by the way. I mean, it follows all the trends that we would talk about in the technology industry about personalization, about unique experiences, except it's in the physical world, right? And then the amplification that technology provides. I mean, that's all amazing.
So thank you so much. And if people need to get in touch with you, how do they get in touch with you?
Oh, well, I'm claire.dillon at live.ie, or just, I suppose, connect with me at LinkedIn. I'd be delighted. And I'm Claire Dillon in LinkedIn.
Great. Thanks so much, Claire.
David, so we're back in the studio and there is a lot to unpack here. First, let's, talk about mixed reality. People know this, may know this as augmented reality, and we've written about that. In BizBash, most recently, there was a get well card that Honda created for hospitalized children for the holiday season that was really touching. And I dare anyone to watch that video and not tear up. I've tried the HoloLens myself. David, have you tried it yet?
I have put it on. I have tried it. It's so interesting. I think all these things, as event organizers, you have to experience this stuff in order to understand what is going on in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to her point about how mixed reality invites people to be a part of the experience as well. You're not just putting on your VR glasses and you're gone from everybody else.
Oh yeah, no, it's as real as you can get.
Yeah. I did an incredible VR experience recently, and it was so lifelike, and it involved movement, but I almost found myself getting motion sickness. So you really have to be careful and think of these things.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I judged an VR music video contest, and I really found myself, you had to have a complete swivel chair that went all the way around or else it didn't work.
Yeah, exactly. Your rentals are very important.
Very important.
You asked her about how to scale these technologies for large groups, and she was optimistic. Are you?
I think that there are a lot of challenges, and what we see today is probably not at all what it will be in the future, but you have to start somewhere.
That's a good point. Well, I can't wait to see, and we will get to experience this going forward, and we'll be reporting about it at BizBash. We regularly write about technology, so our listeners here can read more about technology and our technology issue. That's at bizbash.com/magazine. And we also recently covered CES in Las Vegas, including impressive trade show booths on the floor and activations during the event. So listeners can find that on our website as well.
So Beth, what else is new at BizBash?
Well, in addition to that, we are hard at work finishing our annual venue guide, and that will be out very soon. So we intend this to be your Bible for venues, and a great way to look up what's happening in 17 cities across North America. So find that soon.
So I guess we're at the end of another podcast.
Gather on, David.
Gather on.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the GatherGeeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter at GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of GatherGeeks. Until then, gather on. Invest in yourself and your staff with self-paced online event education designed to fit into your busy schedule. Subscribe to the Event Leadership Institute for only $25 per month and gain access to an extensive on-demand video library of classes, as well as interviews with industry leaders. Best of all, you can watch classes in small pieces or all at once. For more information, visit eventleadershipinstitute.com.